February 28th, 2026. 2:15 p.m. Gulf Standard Time. The radio crackle on the bridge of oil tanker MT Pacific Voyager, carrying 2 million barrels of Saudi crude through the Strait of Hormuz toward Asian markets. The voice came through VHF Channel 16, the International Maritime Distress Frequency. Calm, measured, Persian accented English. Attention all vessels. This is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy. No ship is allowed to pass the Strait of Hormuz. I repeat, no ship is allowed to pass the Strait of Hormuz. Turn back immediately. According to the UK Maritime Trade Operations agency monitoring shipping security, multiple vessels received identical VHF transmissions throughout February 28th. Iran had just closed the world's most vital oil choke point. And with that single action, the global economy entered crisis mode. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow waterway connecting the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and Arabian Sea. According to Wikipedia and maritime data, it's approximately 167 kilometers long, with width varying from 97 kilometers at widest to just 39 kilometers at narrowest. On the northern shore lies Iran. On the southern shore, the Muzandam Peninsula is shared by UAE and Oman. This geography gives Iran control over key approaches. According to energy consulting firm Kpler and Bloomberg reporting, approximately 15 million barrels of oil per day passed through the strait in 2025. That represents roughly one-third of the world's total seaborne crude exports, or about 20% of global oil supply. Additionally, approximately 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas exports flow through the strait, mostly from Qatar. There is no alternative route of comparable capacity. Some pipelines exist, handling maybe 3 million barrels per day combined. The strait is irreplaceable. The closure came as direct retaliation for the joint U.S.-Israeli strikes that killed Supreme Leader Khamenei on February 28th. According to Iranian state media cited by NPR and Al Jazeera, Iran's Ministry of Defense declared there will be no mercy or forgiveness in taking revenge for the leader. The statement made clear Iran would target shipping vessels and commercial interests. According to Reuters citing a European Union naval mission official, vessels began receiving VHF transmissions from Iran's Revolutionary Guard stating no ship is allowed to pass the Strait of Hormuz. Iran did not formally confirm the closure through diplomatic channels. According to international maritime law experts cited by Bloomberg, this lack of formal confirmation means the closure isn't legally binding. But according to military and industry sources, legality is irrelevant. Safety cannot be guaranteed. The immediate shipping industry response was panic. According to Reuters citing trading sources on February 28th, several major oil companies and trading firms paused shipments through the waterway immediately. According to ship tracking data analyzed by Bloomberg, by March 1st, oil and gas shipping had largely paused in the strait. A trickle of vessels moved out, but none appeared entering. At least 17 oil tankers reportedly continued transit despite warnings, but vast majority of commercial traffic halted. According to Cirium aviation data reported by CNBC, Dubai International Airport saw 70% flight cancellations on March 1st due to regional security concerns. The economic implications are genuinely terrifying. According to Robert McNally, president of Rapidan Energy Group, speaking to CNBC on February 28th, a prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz is a guaranteed global recession. About 14 million barrels per day of crude flow to the strait, according to 2025 Kpler data. Approximately three-quarters, about 10.5 million barrels per day, go to China, India, Japan, and South Korea. China, the world's second-largest economy, receives half of its total crude imports through Hormuz. That's approximately 5 million barrels per day suddenly unavailable or extremely risky. China imports roughly 10 million barrels per day total, meaning Hormuz closure cuts off 50% of Chinese oil supply. The spare capacity problem makes this catastrophic. According to McNally's CNBC analysis, the world's spare oil production capacity comes primarily from Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Iraq. All export through Hormuz. In a closure, that spare capacity is sealed off from global markets. Saudi Arabia has a pipeline to the Red Sea with capacity around 5 million barrels per day. UAE has a pipeline to Gulf of Oman bypassing Hormuz. But combined, these alternatives can't replace the 14 million barrels per day that normally flows through the strait. The price implications were severe. According to financial analysts cited by Responsible Statecraft on February 28th, even one day of full blockade could cause global oil prices to double from $66 per barrel to more than $120. On Friday, February 27th, Brent crude settled near $73 per barrel. Analysts warned that when markets reopen after the weekend, prices could surge $5 to $10 immediately, potentially reaching $80 to $85. But if closure persisted for days or weeks, according to McNally and other experts, oil could hit $200 per barrel or higher. At those levels, global economic recession becomes inevitable. The economic mechanism McNally described to CNBC was chilling. What you would see is hoarding, especially by Asian countries that were big importers when they realized that Hormuz is closed. You would see the mother of all bidding wars. Countries dependent on oil imports would panic buy whatever crude was available from non-Gulf sources, driving prices to extreme levels. Oil prices would have to rise high enough to trigger an economic downturn that reduces demand sufficiently to balance the market. There just isn't enough discretionary or elastic demand for oil, McNally noted. The only way to balance supply and demand when 14 million barrels per day suddenly disappear is to crash the economy so badly that demand falls by 14 million barrels per day. That's a global depression scenario. Natural gas was equally dire. According to McNally and Bloomberg, about 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas exports flow through Hormuz, mostly from Qatar. LNG must be transported by specialized ships. If Hormuz is closed, Qatari LNG cannot reach Asian and European markets. There is no replacement supply of that magnitude available globally. Europe, which relied on LNG imports to replace Russian pipeline gas since 2022, would face immediate energy shortages. Asian countries like Japan and South Korea would face blackouts and rationing. Regional reactions added complexity. According to Gulf News and regional media, Saudi Arabia and other Gulf Arab states were infuriated by Iran's closure, despite condemning the U.S.-Israeli strikes. Saudi Arabia relies on oil exports through Hormuz for majority of government revenue. Kuwait, UAE, Qatar, and Iraq are similarly dependent. According to Al Jazeera and Reuters, Saudi Arabia had stated on February 28 it would not allow its airspace or territory to be used to target Iran. But Iran's retaliatory missiles hit Riyadh and other Saudi cities anyway, and the strait closure threatened Saudi Arabia's economic lifeline. According to Saudi government statements cited by CNN, the kingdom vowed to take all necessary measures to defend itself and ensure freedom of navigation. The insurance industry reacted immediately. According to maritime insurance analysts cited by Responsible Statecraft, insurance firms warned clients that rates for ships transiting the Gulf could rise by 50% in coming days. According to Tom Close of Close Advisors speaking to CNBC, the attack by Iran on other neighbors puts pressure on insurers to either aggressively raise tanker rates for Strait of Hormuz travel or balk at underwriting any traffic. Without insurance, tankers cannot legally operate. Iran's capability to enforce the closure was substantial. According to McNally speaking to CNBC, the market does not appreciate that Tehran has large stockpiles of mines and short-range missiles that could seriously disrupt traffic. Iran has spent decades preparing for the scenario. The Revolutionary Guards operate dozens of fast attack craft armed with anti-ship missiles. According to Wikipedia, Iran conducted smart control of the Strait of Hormuz exercise in mid-February 2026, just 2 weeks before the closure. The 2002 Millennium Challenge war game showed Iran's asymmetric tactics could defeat materially superior U.S. forces in confined Gulf waters. There were already enforcement signs. According to reporting from Oman cited by NPR, an oil tanker in the strait came under attack on March 1st, wounding 4 mariners. The attack targeted a Palau flag vessel called Skylight. According to Bloomberg citing ship tracking data, a small tanker sanctioned by the U.S. for helping Iran export fuels, was also targeted off Oman's northern coast on March 1st. The geopolitical stakes extended beyond economics. According to Trump's Truth Social statements, the U.S. responded with escalation warnings. They better not do that. If they do, we will hit them with a force that has never been seen before. Trump told Axios on March 1st, I can go long and take over the whole thing, or end it in 2 or 3 days and tell the Iranians, see you again in a few years if you start rebuilding. Neither option addressed how to actually reopen the strait, if Iran had mined it or was actively targeting shipping. The situation posed a dilemma for U.S. military planners. According to defense experts, clearing mines from a waterway as large as the strait could take weeks or months, requiring specialized mine-sweeping vessels exposed to Iranian anti-ship missiles. Neutralizing Iran's shore-based missile batteries would require extensive airstrikes and potentially ground operations. Even if accomplished, commercial shipping companies would still need to believe the route was safe before sending their multi-hundred-million-dollar tankers through. International reactions were divided and ineffective. According to Xinhua News and China Daily, China called on the U.S. and Israel to immediately stop military actions and respect Iran's sovereignty. But China desperately needed the oil. According to Business Today India citing Kpler, China purchased 1.38 million barrels per day of Iranian oil in 2025, plus significant volumes from Saudi Arabia, UAE, and other Gulf producers, all now unavailable. Russia had been filling some gaps, with Chinese-Russian crude imports increasing 370,000 barrels per day in February 2026. But Russian supply couldn't replace 5 million barrels per day of Gulf oil. Europe faced similar constraints. According to Reuters and AFP, European nations called for maximum restraint and urged diplomatic solutions. The EU's naval mission aspired to confirm the Iranian warnings, but could do little without U.S. military support. European dependence on Qatari LNG meant an enormous stake in reopening the strait, but limited capability to achieve it independently. OPEC's response was a modest stabilization attempt. According to the organization's official statement reported by CNBC and Bloomberg, OPEC Plus agreed on March 1st to raise oil production by 206,000 barrels per day. But 206,000 barrels is a drop compared to 14 million barrels per day potentially lost. The gesture was largely symbolic. By March 1st, 2026, the situation remained unresolved and deeply unstable. Oil tankers were avoiding the strait. Some vessels were turning back. A few attempted transit despite risks. Iran had not yet comprehensively enforced the closure with overwhelming military force, but attacks on individual vessels suggested that could change at any moment. The U.S. and Israel continued airstrikes on Iran, but had not launched the massive operation necessary to forcibly reopen the strait. Global markets were bracing for Monday, March 2nd, when oil futures and stock markets would reopen and react to crisis. The Strait of Hormuz had been threatened many times in history. According to Wikipedia, during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, both countries attacked shipping, but Iran never fully closed the strait, because doing so would have destroyed its own oil export revenues. This time was different. Iran's leadership was dead or scattered. The country was under existential attack. The calculation had changed. If Iran's regime was going to fall anyway, why not inflict maximum economic pain on adversaries and the world that had sanctioned and attacked Iran for decades? The February 28, 2026 closure of the Strait of Hormuz was not a bluff. It was economic warfare at the most strategic level possible, leveraging geography to hold the global economy hostage. And as of March 1st, there was no clear path to resolution that didn't involve either catastrophic military escalation or catastrophic economic collapse. The world was waiting to see which came first.